Welcome back. All right, so news video for all you fine people on the internet today. I'm not going to say news of the day specifically because there are a couple of news items here that have taken place since I was last home that I wanted to talk about in this kind of a format. And I will go more into depth on the New York Islanders soon because I think there's a couple of ways to look at things with how the New York Islanders are figuring out things going forward. There's definitely the negative side. I want to bring out the positive side as well. Yes, there could be some negatives. Now, we're going to start off talking about the NHLPA. So we knew that Ron Fair was going to be out of a job soon and that there would need to be a replacement. That replacement apparently is going to be Marty Walsh, who has been working as the U.S. Labor Secretary. So he will step away from that job. He will apparently take over the NHLPA. Now, I have no idea whether this is going to be a good or a bad thing for us as fans, or if it's going to be a good or bad thing for the NHL. And I say this because if the NHLPA feels like, we want to play more hardball when it comes to our negotiations with the owners, and if they feel like Walsh is the guy who will do that, that could lead to labor uncertainty down the road. On the other hand, if things continue the way that they've been, I don't see any reason to expect a lockout. I'm one of the few that still doesn't think we would add a lockout at all in 2020 anyways, and I think that the odds of there being a lockout drop as the cap keeps going up, and the league's doing relatively well. Depending on which numbers you like, which numbers you agree with, all that other fine stuff. But it will be interesting to see how Marty Walsh runs the NHLPA. He was also Boston's mayor from 2014 till 2021 and apparently knows the game well. So it is somebody coming in who knows hockey, knows the NHL, and that's important. Of course, during All Star Weekend, it was announced that Toronto would be the All Star Game host next year. This is interesting because they go from Florida, where there were some, and again, they're doing this every year, right? Where they have these events that are geared towards the local market, and they're kind of, I don't know, they're just the whole thing's weird. And now the complaints are that the players aren't even trying anymore. And I think there's something to that. I do. I think that any competitiveness that might have been at the NHL All Star Games gone by the wayside. I think what used to happen was I think there was more of a one guy trying to show the other up. So they were still friendly, it was still friendly competition, but they were trying to show each other up. And I'm not sure that's happening anymore. And so while there was a lot of attention given to Sarah Nurse, and I've seen it, and the goal on Igor, and Igor didn't try, and then people saying, well, Igor didn't try and the other ones either. Can we just agree that the players don't really try at these events, and they've kind of become, I think, so far into the hey, we're trying to make it fun that it kind of takes anything that might be interesting to your normal hockey audience away from it. However, ESPN apparently was quite happy. Viewership in the key demographic, 18 to 49. If you're outside of the demographic, and I will be outside of the demographic soon enough, um, generally broadcasters don't care as much what you think because you don't buy as much stuff. They want to make sure that advertisers are going to pay to be, advertising on your broadcasts. And so in the 18 to 49 demo, viewership went up, and apparently there was a sharp growth in female viewers as well by I think 63% over last year. They also said that the streaming version of this of the skills and of the All Star Game itself were very well watched. So we'll see, right? We'll see whether or not it becomes more of a serious thing in Toronto. I would think it should. I think really it's about that balance between making it a serious game, which we know the NHL players aren't going to treat it like a serious game, but make it so that I don't know, it feels like there's the efforts there, right? Um, I can't imagine it would be very exciting or fun to play where the effort's not there. But again, it really is going to be on the players about whether or not that effort comes back. However, the NHL decides to dress this up. Um, I mean, All Star Weekend, there were a lot of people that I've seen that didn't like it. But if the numbers are up on ESPN, maybe we get more goofy stuff next year. Maybe it'll be just as goofy. Maybe I'll need to take another vacation because as soon as I saw like all the comments and I was talking to people in Anaheim about it, I realized it's probably for the best I didn't see it. And it's not that long ago that I would actually do a video after and on the skills. Here's who had the hardest shot, and here's who did the best at this. And um, I just don't have the interest now, and I don't know that that's necessarily going to change. But again, I'm not going to be in the key demographic anyways. So my viewership wouldn't be considered as important as viewership of people who are younger than me, right? Now, that being said, the All-Star game will be as divisive as ever, I would think, next season. But the fact it'll be in Toronto, I think, is nice. I think it's nice to see it in the market that without Toronto, especially at the beginning of the NHL during its roots, without Toronto, you probably don't have a National Hockey League. That's why they said, hey, we don't like Eddie Livingstone, but we have to have a team in Toronto. So we'll just take his players and building, and we'll let him keep the team's name and the league's name, but we'll take everything else, right? So, yeah, there's that. So getting back with some other hockey-related news, Hartman is going to be placed back on a line with Kaprizov and Zuccarello for tomorrow's game for the Wild. Really, it is about trying to get Hartman going more than anything else. The Minnesota Wild, of course, having had some ups and downs over the last few weeks, but if they can get Hartman going, that would be huge. And getting multiple lines going would be huge for Minnesota as well. That loss last night against Arizona, that even though they're coming out of the break, and sure, they might be a little sleepy, but that's an alarming loss. That's a game, those are 2 points you need to get when you're in that race for the last playoff spot in the West. Currently, of course, sitting third in the division, but that's a very tenuous spot for them to be in, and they could easily drop below the playoff line. They have been below the playoff line recently as well. So putting Hartman back on that line could be big. Jonas Brodin, also considered unlikely to play. He got hurt late last night. It's a lower body injury, so we'll see if he plays in the next game. Without Brodin, that would make a big difference to that blue line in Minnesota. Patrick Kane, and this was something I was reading yesterday, is basically undecided on what the future is going to be for him and what his plans are. I would be very surprised if he doesn't say, all right, trade me. I'd be quite surprised if that's not the case. But that's one thing about signing contracts with no movement clauses. If you choose to use them, fans shouldn't be able to just get mad. Fans shouldn't be able to, and the organization shouldn't be mad at you either. That's why it's there. That's why you signed it. That's why they signed it. That certainty that if Kane decides, you know what, I'll just ride it out here in Chicago and I'll make a move during the summer if I choose to. I think he's been good enough for long enough that I think he's earned that right. But I do think he'll move at the deadline. I think it'll be a team in the East. I would be very surprised if he moves somewhere else in the West. But I think it'll be a team in the East where the arms race should be ridiculous. And maybe Kane ends up being that first piece that goes there after Horvat. Horvat, I think, is the sign that this arms race could be something, because the Islanders, of course, below the playoff line when they make that deal. Now, two signings that were done last week. Sonny Milano, 3 years for him with the Caps, $1.9 million. Absolutely ecstatic for Milano that he goes from a tryout and not really having a contract and things not going great. He did not have a good preseason either, so that didn't help. But since he got to Washington, things have worked, and he's been quite good. So it's nice to see that he'll be sticking around there, and a team's decided to invest in him for the next few years. Dylan Strome, another case of a player that team just decided, well, we're not going to keep him, and he moves on and goes to Washington. 5 years at $5 million per season. Now, one thing we saw before the All-Star break is that the Capitals, when everybody's healthy, they have too many forwards. I would expect that with Milano and Strome signed, that this is a sign that other veterans could be on their way out. The other way I would look at it, too, is it is quite possible that Nick Backstrom, considering the injury he's returned from, the surgery he's had, it is possible that this could be his last year. We don't know. Think along the same lines as Shea Weber, where we just didn't know, and then we found out, hey, Weber might not play again. And it seemed so odd because he was playing right then for the Montreal Canadiens. But it's possible that this is their way of signaling that they don't expect to have him going forward, or there could be other players moving on as well. So for the Capitals, the good news is Milano and Strome are both guys who are in their prime. And so a team that's probably needed to get some more younger stars has a couple younger players they picked up without giving up any assets to get them. And so they're keeping them around for a combined $6.9 million in cap hit. Horvat's 8-year deal. And I thought it was funny because I understand that people don't like 8-year deals. This is just the reality of the hockey world right now, though. 8-year deals are the norm. And for people who get mad about 8-year deals, I don't know if people realize that if there wasn't a limit of 8 years, we would see 9 years, 10 years, 12 years. We would absolutely see that. And we would see contracts that the cap hit would come down. So maybe Horvat would get a 12-year deal, and maybe the cap hit would be $7.5 million a year. So the cap hit come down, but it'd be a ridiculously long contract, right? And basically sign him until he was 40. This contract takes him into his mid-30s, and I don't think this contract's going to be a problem. The salary cap goes up this coming summer, likely by $1 million. It may end up being more than that. But I think Horvat's contract's going to age well because it's not just about scoring. The example I would use is Jordan Staal. When Jordan Staal signed the contract that's running out now with Carolina, there were a lot of hems and haws and a lot of furrowed brows and about how Staal wasn't going to be worth that. Staal has been worth that to Carolina because he's a leader, because he's good on faceoffs, he's a solid defensive forward, and so even if the offense isn't what you would like for the cap hit that's provided, he does enough with the rest of his game to justify it. And I think with Horvat, that's what we'll see. So if this is a career year and he doesn't score 30, 35 goals again, he ends up being a 20, 25 goal, 55, 60 point player. If he's still taking a ton of faceoffs, if he is continuing to improve his defensive game, and it's not a great defensive game for Horvat, but he hasn't really played for a team that has a great defensive style either. Now he does. So it'll be interesting to see how his game really evolves in New York. He's already had experience as a captain, so in the event that during that contract that they have a need of a captain or they have need of somebody to wear an A, definitely Horvat's a guy who can do that. He can provide them with leadership. He's played in one of the toughest markets in the league in terms of media scrutiny and fan scrutiny. And so I think he'll excel in New York. I don't expect the scoring to be crazy. Last night he didn't get a point in his debut. I would not be surprised if for the rest of the season he scores maybe 5 goals the rest of the way for the Islanders. I also wouldn't be surprised if he scores 15 or 20 because he's capable of getting on hot streaks. But for the Islanders, I think it was about the ability to take those faceoffs, the really solid two-way play that he's shown at points in his career. And I don't think the cap hit's that bad. I don't. Because, again, I like to compare it to other cap hits around the NHL, and I just don't think it's that bad. I do think that with Miller and Horvat separated, it's possible both their games get better. I would expect JT Miller's year in Vancouver to get better. There were some signs in last night's game for New Jersey that Miller's going to play a more prominent role, and he may already be playing better than he was before Rick Tocchet's arrival. So this is one of those things where I can wish Horvat the best with the Islanders. I really like Horvat. He's still one of my favorite players. But I can also look at what Vancouver's doing and say, you know what? I like the players in Vancouver. It'd be great if Miller's game gets better and overall the team's fortunes do improve. So I think people get stuck with the whole, hey, 4 years from now, GMs do not sign an 8-year deal thinking about 4 years later because they could be gone 4 years later. If you sit down with a forward who's 27 years of age and you say, we're going to offer you a 2-year deal, they're not signing. If you offer them a 4-year deal, they're probably not signing that either. So you're really in a position that because this is the expectation, you sign the player for this deal or they leave for nothing. In some cases, that can be for the best. But in many cases, you want to keep that player around. The one question I had with that trade with the Canucks was, okay, so do I see any of these parts of this trade for Horvat becoming another Bo Horvat? And at this point, I would say Beauvillier, who's got the speed and he looked good last night against New Jersey. He's not Horvat. Ratu, no idea. No idea Ratu is still a wild card in this. And then there's that first round draft pick. We don't know where that draft pick's going to be. We don't know for sure it's going to be this year's draft or it's going to be next year's. And so there's no way to know. And so that's why when the trade was made, I said, you know, I like the Islanders and I still like the Islanders in this trade. And I think that this signing shows that Lou Lamoriello is serious about keeping things together. And I think it sends a good message to the room. It tells the guys in the New York Islanders locker room that he's not trading guys off and he's not giving up and that he believes in them. He did not trade a core piece in order to get Horvat. He trades 2 guys they know, but he didn't trade that core piece. And while it was tough for Beauvillier to move on from players he was close to and vice versa, there are other players close to him in New York, the reality is bringing in Horvat gives them this message of Lou Lamoriello believes in the guys in this room. And that can make a big difference. It can. But let me know your thoughts in the comments section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.